You are listening to the sounds of the Right On Network.
Hello and welcome to episode 5 of On the Record Jams, brought to you by the Right On Network. I'm AJ and along with me is Arthur. Hello, Arthur.
Hello, AJ. We're back. It feels like it's been a long time, but we're here now.
We're here now. It has been a long time. We're back. We're 5 episodes deep. We've had a lot of people listen to this and give us feedback. It's been positive. On this episode, the last episode, Arthur, you took us back to the 90s with Outkast, Skew It on the Barbecue.
Yes, I did.
So I'm going to keep us there. And for this one, on the record, I'm going to bring a song from Nirvana. All right?
Yeah.
This record is called Frances Farmer Will Have Her Revenge on Seattle. It came out in 1993. So Scooter on the Barbecue, that's 97, 98. That's a whole different kind of 90s from 93, right?
Yes, it is. Very much so.
So, and I think during this time, from my point of view, this was during a time period where I think 93, we were getting out of that early 1990s, because when you're at the beginning of a decade, you're still kind of shaking the dust off the previous decade, right? So from my point of view, I just remember the early 90s being kind of dark. And in the early middle 90s, it was still darker. It was still dark, but I felt like light and we're turning a corner and we're going towards the mid 90s, late 90s, and like a whole different era of television, movie, and music, right? And language, right?
I agree. I mean, you talk about the expansion too, right? You think there was going from tapes to CDs, I think was a bigger deal than people understand. You have that plus getting to the point where cable television was something that a lot of people with a TV had. And so you think all those channels, you're getting to the point where TV doesn't actually turn off at 2:00 in the morning, and you got all night long television, you got all night long videos, you got all night long, all of these different things available and all this information for people to take in, depending on how late they stay up or how early they get up. Little did we know how crazy things would get years later, right? But that jump from 2 or 3 stations listening to AM radio on a regular basis and that being kind of the base to now you expand, you get more radio stations, you get more outlets for music, and which means you get more types of music having a chance to, I don't know what you want to call it, blow up, right? But it's like that. I know it seems like I felt that at that period of time, like that early 90s era.
So let's say this, Arthur. Okay, so this is the situation. I'm bringing on the record this Nirvana song that's off their 3rd proper studio album called In Utero. And I'll get to that. But what I wanted to mention is this. So in the 80s, I shared a room with my older brother. So I basically just listened to what he listened to, and it was hip-hop. So a lot of things that were going on in the 80s as far as rock music was kind of novelty to me. Remember Van Halen, that kind of stuff?
Yeah.
I remember that being almost like a super cartoon, right? Like even in Everybody Wants Some, I Want Some Too, I didn't even know that was Van Halen at the time. I just knew that because that was in Better Off Dead, the movie, when he worked at a burger joint and the burgers were singing that song. So in the 80s, you had the hair metal and the over the top, and I mean that in a neutral way, like arena rock. So all of that went over my head, right? So like Living on a Prayer, all that stuff, that was kind of like kind of superhero stuff, but it was like, that seemed like superhero things. Like I can't touch that. It's just, it's things above my head. Like all that just, it went over my head. So I wasn't into any of that. I didn't know anything about it. And so when we get into the 90s, so with the hair metal, I think you and I and our mutual friend, we talk about Sweet Cherry Pie, right? Where like it's a woman, she's gyrating on a car.
Yes.
Because in the 80s, dude, these guys were superheroes. They're bigger than life. Their crotch is out. They're not out, but they're rocking out with the cock out. Just a figure of speech, right? So it's arena rock, it's 80s, it's hair metal, it's all this stuff. These guys are bigger than life. The women are beautiful. They're gyrating on a car. They're doing this stuff. Okay. So they had this thing on MTV, Music Television, or Mount TV. It wasn't Mount TV. It was Music Television. And they had this show that came on late at night called Headbangers Ball. And there was a dude on there, I think his name was Scott, but maybe it wasn't. And he looked like, hey, I'm a guy. I listen to headbanger music. And I'm telling you guys about like heavy metal headbanger music. So Nirvana, they had their first album's called Bleach. And Nirvana, they would do these things. The thing that I like about them is they do deceptive things where they try to like, hey, we're presenting to ourselves that what we're doing is very simple and we're kind of boneheads. But if you look into it, like there's consciousness going on. But we don't want to be upfront about that, right?
Right.
So, okay, they're Nirvana, they come out. And with Bleach, there is a lot of like metal stuff on there. Like it's a lot of stuff. Like it's kind of things on there that's poppy in a very deceptive way. But it's a lot of metal on there because I would get that if the album came out like in 90 and they're listening to music in the 80s and he wants to be, do guitar music, you're going to bump into some metal stuff. Okay, I get it. So Nirvana, Chris Novoselic, the bass player, and Kurt Cobain, they go on Headbangers Ball. This was probably 91, maybe 92, I doubt it, maybe 90, 91. And Kurt Cobain is wearing this bright yellow dress. So you got to think about it. Heavy metal, it's a lot of machismo. We're guys, we got the girls, all this stuff, right? So he's taking the piss out of all of that, and he shows up with a dress on. Because he goes, the show's called Headbangers Ball, so I thought I would wear a ball dress to this. Because I'm taking the piss out of what you guys are doing, right?
Right.
So it was kind of like, whoa, what's happening here? And then, I'm not saying because of that, but then Headbangers Ball, it goes away. Because, so it's like, all right, Nirvana, they come out and they kind of do the anti-hero thing. And that's going to be a big thing going on in the 90s, where like X-Men is kind of like, hey, we're the good guys, but we're raw, we're rough around the edges. We're not Superman and all this stuff where Batman, where we got capes and it's all hunky-dory. Not saying that Superman, Batman's hunky-dory, trust me. I love Superman and Batman. But I'm just saying, just from an outsider's perspective looking in, X-Men, that seemed pretty raw. So guess what? X-Men ruled the 90s. So we have Kurt Cobain. They do this album called Nevermind. And on the first video, it's called Smells Like Teen Spirit. And they got girls in the video. They're cheerleaders even. They're wearing all black. They got an anarchy symbol. You got Kurt Cobain. He's in the video, kind of not looking at the camera. So you got a lot of anti-hero stuff going on. He's not showboating. He's not, and again, I'm not putting down that stuff that was going on. Now, I truly appreciate that music. But I'm just saying, it's one of them situations where it kind of made everything look like, oh, that stuff's corny. Then all of a sudden, that hair metal stuff, all that stuff, bam, it starts going away. And then like I'm doing lyrics where they're kind of not straight up, they're cryptic. They might even be bullcorn. Who knows? I might be Bob Dylan. I might be a charlatan. I might be both. Who knows? I might be talking about social commentary. I might be the voice of a generation. I might be a druggie. Who knows? So you got all these abstract kind of concrete. It's a bonehead stuff, but it might be more to it than that. It might be consciousness, or if we really look into it, it's no consciousness at all. It's bonehead stuff. But who knows, right? Because when you go back and you listen to that heavy metal music, that hair arena rock music, the stuff is very like the musicality to it is very, it has a lot of depth to it. Like it's fantastic. But this always happened where boom, 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 Nas comes out. Bam. We got great beats. Dude, I'm doing these lyrics, this imagery. I took it back to the essence. I simplified it. Boom. Okay, yeah. You start over again. With Bob Dylan. He comes out with the song Like a Rolling Stone. The soul singer, I can't remember what soul singer it was, but he went to another soul singer. He was like, hey, I listened to that song Like a Rolling Stone. I don't get it. What is that? And the guy was like, I think at this point now, you don't have to be able to sing well. It's just when you sing, people need to believe that you mean it. Boom, change things. Oh, okay. So with Nirvana, this is happening. All right. So the world was one way. Boom. Nirvana comes out. It smells like Teen Spirit. Boom. The world is another way. So that's what's going on. So with Nevermind, when that comes out, they have a producer, Butch Vig. So Nirvana, they do mostly like, hey, we're doing garage rock, kind of snot metal type stuff. And Butch Vig is like, hey, I want to kind of straighten this up. And the production is slick. And some of it, Nirvana they were kind of uncomfortable with. Because that's also, too, something that we're going to get from Nirvana on a mainstream level. We're going to get those punk rock ethos. Those things like, hey, they brought us in a limo and we're kind of ashamed of it. Where it was like in the 80s, dude, it was all about like, hey, we're in a limo. There was no shame to it. But with Nirvana having those faux, pseudo, real punk rock ethos, they kind of introduced that on a mainstream level. At least to me, that's what I kind of thought. Whereas like, I feel like if we made it big and we're doing an interview, hey, we're excited about someone's interviewing us. With Nirvana, it was like we're shying away from the camera, like, and all this stuff. And then that's when it went from having the Headbangers Ball on MTV to something called 120 Minutes, where it was like alternative rock. And every time they interviewed someone, they would give the interviews like they witnessed a murder or they were the victim of something. Like they would be rubbing their jeans and kind of looking down. Like everyone seemed like they've been touched weirdly. I just remember like being a kid in middle school and like watching these interviews, like everyone was acting like that. And like people were cryptic or they weren't forthcoming or they had like being interviewed was kind of a drag or if I'm going to be in this interview, I'm going to make fun of the interview or something, like be difficult. So like all that stuff, like the 90s, all that stuff is coming out, right? Gen X, all this stuff, slacker lifestyle, all this stuff, we're directionless, all that's coming out. So Nirvana makes it big. Nevermind, the production is big, it's slick, it's good stuff. So it's like, okay, when they come up with another album, what is that going to be like? So now we're getting close to Nirvana making their third proper studio album, In Utero. And they commission, may rest in peace, Steve Albini. And Steve Albini, he was out of like the Chicago music scene and he's a producer. He liked to call himself an engineer, not a producer. And his reputation was like, hey, I'm hands off. I want it to sound like, hey, like this is honest. So like when they made Nevermind, Butch Vig was trying to convince Kurt Cobain, like, hey, double track your vocals. He was like, I don't want to do that. That don't seem honest. And like Butch Vig was like, hey, John Lennon would do it. And Kurt Cobain, he was big in the Beatles. So he's like, okay, if John Lennon do it, I'll do it. Because John Lennon, like the first time he double tracked his vocals, he was like, oh, I want to do that every time. Because I guess he felt vulnerable when it was just one vocal. I guess he felt like there was more depth or strength if he double tracked his vocals, I guess. So with In Utero, it's raw. All right. It sounds like you're in the studio with them. It doesn't sound like the drummer is over here. The vocalist is in the closet singing in that. And then the bass player is in that room. It sounds like they're all in the same room. It's raw sound. And to me, I feel like raw energy, it will always be timeless. Like, no matter if we're in the year 2025, 1997, 2015, 1971, just raw energy, it'll just always make it. So with this song, Francis Farmer Will Have a Revenge on Seattle, I think and another thing about Nirvana is one of those 90s things where, like, they'll tell you, like, hey, Seinfeld is this 90s hit and all this stuff. I'm here to tell you guys, no one was watching Seinfeld. I was watching Seinfeld. Arthur was watching Seinfeld. But Seinfeld is one of those things where, like, if you just sat on a park bench and someone sat next to you and you go, did you watch Seinfeld? I would bet dollars to donuts they would say no. And Nirvana, as much as I like them, and you see Nirvana everywhere, people wearing their t-shirts now, Nirvana's one of those bands where, was it a hit? Was it everywhere? Yeah. Nobody was listening to Nirvana because kind of at the end of the day, Nirvana and Seinfeld, they're not fun. It's not fun, right? So, and even, I remember one time, Janine Garofalo, again, like a 90s comedian, whatever, she was on MTV, and this was during, like, kind of post Britney Spears, and this was when people started complaining, like, hey, man, they don't play good music on MTV anymore. And she was saying, like, hey, I guess she was making one of those arguments, like, it seemed like it was more fun when Nirvana was taking over. And they were explaining to her that, hey, actually, during those years, our ratings were low. Then, boom, when Britney Spears took over, our ratings were high. So, with In Utero, their third proper album and final album, it was controversial that it's like, okay, you guys are one of the biggest bands in the world. Why would you get this lo-fi guy, Steve Albini, to produce your tracks? Now, to me, when I listen to the album, it doesn't sound lo-fi at all to me. And it doesn't sound muddy or muddled. I remember that was another thing, too, where it's like, people are like, oh, it's muddled, or it sounds like it's all coming out of one stereo, it's mono or whatever. To me, it sounds raw and big. And I didn't think it was risky at all. And I kind of think it's them in their truest form. I think a lot of Nirvana people will be like, okay, out of all the songs, why would you pick this one? I think if I had to do 10 best, maybe I wouldn't pick this song. Maybe. I never thought about it. But to me, I just picked this one because I think that not many people listen to Nirvana. So let's say they listen to this podcast. I think like a lot of Nirvana stuff is in this song, like what they do and all this. And then let's go back to like the subject matter of Frances Farmer Will Have a Revenge on Seattle. So Frances Farmer, I heard like the small details of it through the years. I watched a documentary about it, and she was an actress, and we're talking like in a movie in 1936. So we're talking about like an early actress. They made a movie about her in 1980, and she was from Seattle, and, you know, she was into some stuff, and she made it in Hollywood, and she seemed pretty promising. Like, if you watch footage from her, she seemed pretty modern. And, you know, she got into drinking, got in some trouble. They smeared her name. They tried to do shock treatment to her, do all this stuff. Just really bad things. And her reputation got ruined. On set, they would say she was a troublemaker. So I could see Kurt Cobain gravitating towards this subject matter because he's one of those situations where it's like, hey, we might be misinterpreted. They might be saying I'm a druggy father. He's from that region. Maybe Nirvana at that time wasn't understood or not. So I could see him going like, I want to write about the subject matter. Also where at that time, and especially like in the 90s, he played around with a lot of feminism. Like, again, like I'm going to show up to this headbanger's ball with a dress on. Now, yes, people wearing dresses all the time. At that time, that was pretty risky for him to do that. That was kind of, because, that was also during a time where, like, we'll make it where you can't come on this network again. You will never let you work here anymore. So, like, he was playing around with a lot of that kind of stuff, like, anti-machismo kind of themes in his lyrics and just whatever Nirvana was about. So there's a lot of that going on too, because that was a lot of like punk rock ethos. And he's bringing it on a mainstream level. So, Arthur, I kind of threw this record at you out of nowhere. You gave it a couple of spins. What were your thoughts on it?
Well, you hit a lot of good stuff there. And the angle that I think is going to be predictable for me is I keep using this phrase all the time, but also on our episodes is, when does the public learn? When do people understand these artists give us so much with how music works when it works? You need your Cobains. You need your Sweet Cherry Pies. You need everything in between that. And a lot of times we're better off if we let these artists do what they want to do and don't try to ruin it. Don't try to fit it into a subgenre. Don't try to make it a craze. Don't try to, don't label it neo soul or punk rock or the new era of punk rock or whatever, because these guys just want to make the stuff they want to make. And so I think about Cobain and I think, okay, some of my favorite artists, I always bring up Marvin Gaye. I bring up Prince. These artists in that lineage, they kind of went through the same thing. People wouldn't want to let them do what they were doing. They make one kind of album and it works. And now people act like you just got to be a factory for that type of music forever. And you come at these artists and these kids and you want them to fall into that range to hit some metric on a graph. And that's just not how art works. It's just not. And so that rebellion, that pushback, the showing up with a dress to a place where you probably can't get away with that. Like, I view Cobain as a part of that lineage of the punk rock, the rebellion, no, you already own my music. You already own part of my career. I'm not going to let you own what I wear. I'm not going to let you own what I say. So a lot of those things you talk about come into play where it's just flat out in your face, beat you over the head rebellion. And also, like you mentioned, it's not always like it totally, quote unquote, works from a selling record standpoint, a being popular standpoint. But people see that stuff and then it leads into other things. It like plants the tree that grows and turns into the other thing. Like another example of this is, artists like Tupac. In his interviews that you see, he was like, hey, I don't even know if I'm going to get to do what I'm trying to do or not, but I think I'm going to be the person that sparks the mind that ends up doing what I'm trying to do. And he was well off mentally enough to see it that way. And some of these other artists are like, I don't know who's got next. I got now, like Jay-Z style. And they're like, hey, I just want to do what I'm doing and I don't want to be bothered because this is my thing. But it's just funny how this type of music, this type of subtext, and again, like you mentioned, you can talk yourself into believing that there's a lot of subtext, but depending on who you ask, a lot of Kurt's stuff was written line by line, and he wasn't worried as much about making it all fit together. He's just getting all his stuff out lyric by lyric, almost like a rapper would, to say, hey, this is something I want to say, and I'm going to say it right here in this way. And if you get it, you get it. If you don't, you don't. And it's going to be like Easter eggs all locked into these songs. That's what I gathered very quickly from this one. Obviously, the song title gives you a very obvious X marks the spot clue, right, of where you need to go. And it's 2024, right? So even if you didn't know anything about this song at all, you see the name. Well, you type two words, and now you got something to work with. You got a story. You understand who Francis Farmer is. You, in this era, you may already know enough about Kurt Cobain to dig in and say, okay, why would him and his group make a song about this person? And I think, me, I'm a sucker for context. So when I hear the song, I listen to the song raw, right? I didn't look at any of that stuff. I listened to all the Nirvana albums, not around the time they came out, but after the fact. So well after Kurt had passed. So let's say early 2000s when I listened to these albums originally. So This was more like a revisit for me. And then you come back and catch all this subtext. And then I get, if you know me, you know I get locked in the subtext. What is Kurt trying to tell me? Is Kurt talking about Courtney? Is he talking about himself and Courtney? Is he already at this point in his career and life knowing what would happen? You know, how upset is he about how things are going, considering it seems to be pretty clear that he wasn't interested in being a star, quote unquote. So him getting that star treatment that people never learn, you come into these people's lives, you want to set these stars up to be a certain type of person just because you like their music or just because you like their movies or just because you like their comedy. You want to build a whole character around these people that you want them to play. It's almost like you described, like this superhero thing. Well, it's funny because we're in the age group where we saw a lot of statues get knocked down figuratively and literally, right? Like we had behind the music, we had documentaries for all these bands, all these artists. You find out, oh, okay, and now, even now, we have some people that are getting their statues knocked down based on some of the stuff that are coming up, right? And, you know, without saying his name, I mean, 30 years ago, this guy was jumping around dancing on videos. And everybody's like, man, this is a nice guy. He just likes to party and stuff. And I was shaking my head back then like, not sure. Nah, I didn't know what we know now, but I was still a little skeptical. But it's like those types of things. I think I've learned my lesson on that. Like if I like the music, I like the music. And I'm not going to try to turn these people into anything just because I like the music. And at least to me, like the big 10,000 feet up message is that when I listen to anything Nirvana based that just pops in my head, I think it's a damn shame the kid isn't here anymore to see all the Nirvana t-shirts and see how his music and his group impacted what came after, right? Like I that lack of ability to look back and reflect because he passed so early. Like I want to look at, you know, life as an opportunity for people to, you hope they live long enough to be able to look back, right?
Those Dave Grohl drums on that record, Arthur.
Yeah.
I thought they were powerful.
Yeah, I mean, I like the record itself. I mean, I like the whole thing. Of course, again, I love the subtext and trying to figure out the riddle. And again, it's not as much of a riddle if you see it and you kind of understand Kurt Cobain even at a base level. But yeah, it's a good record. I think I like your explanation too, is that it's kind of definitive to give you an idea of what they were going for as a group, or certainly at least at this time, because I mean they recorded this album. My guess and the things I've read suggested this album got put together pretty quick.
Yeah, pretty quick. Yes, I think maybe 2 weeks.
Right, which I generally love.
Yeah.
Talented groups get together and they bang it out, especially when it's not their first album. I think there's some artists that really benefit from not fiddling and tweaking. They just do it and then get it together and put it out. Like, especially if you're in a groove, right? Or if you got something you really want to get out of your system. I really like to see artists take a shot at doing things like this where it's quick.
And Steve Albini, you know, he's very no messing, where as far as, hey, I'm just engineering it, whatever you guys are going for, I want this to sound honest, and like he don't want points or anything on the album. That's like one of the big things. They're like, man, you didn't take any points. You didn't take any. He's like, no, dude, like I produced and I walked away. And here is the lyrics to this. Francis Farmer will have revenge on Seattle. It's so relieving to know that you're leaving as soon as you get paid. It's so relaxing to hear that you're asking whenever you get your way. It's so soothing to know that you'll sue me, starting to sound the same. I miss the comfort in being sad. 3 times refrain. Inner false witness, I hope you're still with us to see if they float or drown. Our favorite patient, display of patience, disease-covered pungent sound. She'll come back as fire to burn all the liars, leave a blanket of ash on the ground. I miss the comfort of being sad. Refrain, and we get a another verse, and it's so relieving to know that you're leaving as soon as you get paid. It's so relaxing to know that you're asking wherever you get your way. It's so soothing to know that you're sumi, starting to sound the same. Now, I miss the comfort in being sad. I don't know if that's about, hey, I got sadness. We got some medication maybe to mask it. They like, hey, I'm just going to sit in the sadness. I don't know, but man, just wild stuff. I remember even thinking at the time as a kid, I'm like, this is some wild stuff, the subject matter. And then, of course, when he comes to his end, I'm like, man, this stuff is even wilder. But, when you're kind of in it, you're just in it. I think, and especially like, and they're young men, so like Kurt Cobain is 27 at the end, right? So like, I'm in this band, this guy's writing kind of wild lyrics, which is just kind of like, because like Dave Grohl, he came to the band later. Like it's kind of like when they're starting Nevermind, that's when he comes to the band. And he said that they're very like, hey man, keep it simple, man, keep it simple. Because there's a lot of complicated things going on in Nirvana. I'm talking about musically. But he said like they were just like, hey man, look, just hey, it's ABC 1, 2, 3. Just keep it real simple. Keep it real simple. But again, that whole thing, we're being perceptive, like we're making this seem like this simply simple music. And in the end, hey, maybe it is, but it's a lot of layers going on, and that's Nirvana.
And also too, you think about the subtext seekers, right? I mean, it's been 30 years since this song was out, so it's been a lot of time to, create some thoughts. I miss the comfort in being sad. Some people view that as a reference to lobotomy, right? If you, with that procedure, takes some of your ability to feel out of there and makes you docile, versus having like a full mental illness or like this actress. I mean, that's the idea is that happened to her, right? To say, hey, we're gonna numb you. And then you think about now in the 30 years since then, how much medication is a subject of the day. So many people are taking pills for this and that to try to feel this or feel that or feel less of this or less of that. And it's a wild lyric. Again, if you're going to read into it and create subtext, I miss the comfort in being sad, because at least now you talk about the concept of being able to feel what you actually feel, versus this actress being in a space where she couldn't do that. And who knows with Kurt's drug situations and things of that nature, who's to say he wasn't feeling the same way based on the way he was trying to medicate himself, right?
Again, they're doing the thing where we're presenting on the on front bonehead kind of garage rock, but then on the back end is this consciousness going on.
Right, which for the 90s is almost like default settings now. And it's And if you show up now and you're just singing on the surface, people look at you like, wait a minute, where's the trick? You don't have something in the background you're trying to tell me to do? Like, you sure? You sure you don't have some subtext for me? Come on now, give me some subtext.
Hey, Arthur, why don't we do this? Why don't we take a break, and when we come back, we'll see what you're putting on the record.
On the record.
Oh, hi, Dr. Sterner.
Hello, Paul. How are you doing these days?
Yeah, I'm good. Since you, cured me of my DC OCD, I've got so much more time on my hands. It's been for the best.
Well, personally and professionally, I'm quite proud of what we have achieved, but I have some bad news for you, Paul.
Oh? What?
There's something missing without your DC OCD there.
Oh.
I've even heard friends of yours been saying you're basic, a little boring. There's no there.
Oh, what should we do about it?
My God, I hate to have to say this, but we have to go bring it back somehow.
Well, shall we do some more sessions and I can use them to talk about DC events that we haven't covered, like Dark Crisis and Fear State, those sorts of things?
I think that might be for the best, Paul. Let's reconvene in 2024 for more sessions of DC OCD.
And that'll make me interesting?
We will see, Paul. We will see.
Welcome back to On the Record Jams. This is episode 5, brought to you by the Right On Network. Arthur and AJ are here with you as it was written. So, Arthur, what are you adding on the record?
It took me a while. I showed a lot of restraint because this is very much one of my favorite groups. If I couldn't do every episode about Marvin Gaye, might do every episode about the Isley Brothers. So I'm coming here with the Isley Brothers, That Lady Parts 1 and 2, the 1973 version. Get to more on that later. So that's what I'm putting on the record today.
Yes.
Big reason why is I know we've talked about this before, is the Isley Brothers. They've been around for so long. They've released music even recently now with the two remaining brothers that are still a part of the group. So they've been around. I mean, Shout was, my goodness, 50s. You know, You Make Me Want to Shout is, I mean, Shout had to be, 1959 is Shout. So you're talking about they've been around for a really, really long time and making a lot of music. And so it's really hard in my music listening, especially as much as I'm into R&B and soul. There's no way I could stay away from them for too long. So it's got to happen. And so it's happening right now. So the Isley Brothers, That Lady. I really wanted to pick this song because this was a case of a group essentially remaking their own song. So in 1964, they had a song called, guess what? That Lady. So they recorded that song and it was released in April of 1964. And so at that time, the Isley Brothers were basically a trio. So the older three brothers, Ron, Rudolph, and O'Kelly Isley, Ron being the lead singer, they released this spooky sounding, kind of doo-wop-ish 1964 sounding song, Who's That Lady? And it's a good one. It's a hit. And made it up pretty high on the R&B singles chart. I think it made it all the way to like number 2. Went gold at that period of time. So it was a hit for them. And this was before they joined Motown because, of course, they were on Motown. They were on Motown for a while. Things didn't work out. They were a little bit too far behind in the pecking order of who got the hit songs, because we talk about Motown as a assembly line, and people come in and then they get records dropped on them. Sometimes more than one group records the same song and then they pick the one that they think is the best. Like, that was the type of environment it was. And the Isley Brothers, they didn't have the Detroit tie-in. They didn't have really anything to give them a leg up. They weren't married to somebody's sister like Marvin Gaye was. Like, they didn't have that. So they just kind of got left out. They made a hit, but they didn't make enough hits, and then they wanted to go back and do their own thing. So they spent some time from, let's say, mid-'60s to late 60s trying to figure out what their next thing was. And Shout was heavily covered, almost to the point where it fell into that environment where, I think we may have talked about this a little bit, where you get into the 60s music where you have these black artists making songs, making hits, and then artists from around the world would hear that sound and kind of jump on it and start making records with that same sound. And you're talking about in the era of segregation being a thing in the United States. So you almost could have a situation where you could hear the song coming from one group, and then because of segregation being so strong, it's kind of difficult to get your record played on the other side of the street, basically. And so you have all these acts, Isley Brothers included, feeling like, hey, I'm the engine. Like, I'm providing the method for how these songs are getting made, and I'm not getting a chance to benefit from my own stuff because before I can get my record out good, somebody else is making a record almost just like it, and they're going to get played better and more in more places just based on the landscape of race relations. So them trying to fight through that and figure out what they're going to do, well, of course, what that turned into for a lot of acts, Isley's included, is they started covering and remaking hits from white artists. And they literally took it all the way to having an album in the early 70s called Giving It Back. and it's nothing but covers. 1971, like just covers all over the place, and it's not. I usually make the comment of karaoke covers, where it's just like you could basically play the other record on top of it, and they sound like the same record. It's just a different person singing it. No. They went all the way. They funked it up. They threw their own twang on it. Ron Isley is one of the vocalists of all time as far as influences go. And so he put some stank on it. He went in. And we're talking Fire and Rain. We're talking Spill the Wine, Love the One You're With, Lay Letty Lay from Bob Dylan. Like, they hit it, and they hit it hard. And that was 1971. Well, some people who are less optimistic about their thoughts on Isley Brothers viewed it like, yeah, they were doing remakes because they were really trying to hit back at the people that they felt like were still in their style, or just generally showing praise to the artists that they liked. So they were big James Taylor fans. They were big Carole King fans. So they covered their records, and they viewed it as like, we're paying homage to these people to do this. But some people viewed it like, hey, these brothers don't have, they're running out of songs already. Like, they've been at it since the late 50s. It's just the three of them. They're trying to be their self-contained thing. They've tried to do Motown. It's not working out. But here's what happens going into the early 70s, Ashford. They get their younger brother members. They get their younger brothers to join the group. So they get Ernie Isley, guitar player extraordinaire. They get Marvin Isley, also a guitar player, but different type. And then they get their brother-in-law, Chris Jasper, and he's a keyboardist. So they get the three brothers to join up with the two younger brothers and the brother-in-law. And then they go into what most people call the 3+3 configuration of the Isley Brothers. So it's 6 of them now. And then they just hit this 10-year stride of just hits and jams all over the place. And the big intro song is the one I'm putting on the record, That Lady. It's a remake of the prior song. It's them kind of relaying their track and saying, hey, we're starting again. We're the Isley Brothers still, but it's a different type of thing. And we got the funk, we got the jams, we still got Ron Isley's great vocals, and we're about to come through with something that you need to be a part of. And they did it. And wow. I don't know. Was Who's That Lady something that you had around as a kid? When did you hear the Isley Brothers?
Yeah, I feel like I can't remember a time when I didn't know about Who's That Lady or the Isley Brothers in general. And Who's That Lady? What year did that come out?
1973.
Okay, how different was that at the time? Like, when it comes out, like, so, okay, like we said, there's the early 60s version where with that organ, I don't even know if I'm using this correctly, but the chord progression with the keys, I feel like I already liked the song, but I only knew the 70s song. And then maybe a month ago, you hit me with the 60s version, and it made me appreciate the songwriting even more. But, hey, we heard it with Shout, and we hear it with this. You got call and response.
Yep.
You got guitar playing. You got background vocals. I'm a mark for this song. This is an excellent record, but it is cool. Like, it's like you make me want to shout. That is cool. I think also, I guarantee you for the time, people that were hearing that may have been the first time they've heard something that was like that, where it was kind of like a spiritual and like church stuff going on, and it's a pop record. So that's something. And then like, hey, Who's That Lady? You're going into 70s. You're talking about Soul Brother Funk and blaxploitation films. Man. I mean, yeah, it sounds like a soundtrack. Like, the song sounds like a soundtrack, but hey, it's a record for them. And you can throw it into a soundtrack. I agree. It's just like it's almost like it's a coming out party for the group. It's a coming out party for the genre. It's also
the Isley Brothers trying to make sure that people understand they could do it all, like whatever they want to do. Because, yeah, they do have the gospel background, because a lot of people coming up during that time in the R&B and soul space, a lot of them have those church backgrounds. But you have that. You have the rock mixed in. Like, hey, we're not going to put down the guitars. We're going to give you the guitars. We're going to do guitar solos, and we're not going to stop. And we're going to do this at the beginning of the record. We're going to do this as a bridge. We're going to do it as an instrumental. Something else I want to point out with the Isley Brothers, and I remember as a kid being weirded out about this, but then I understood it. A lot of Isley Brothers songs are listed as parts 1 and 2.
Oh.
So the hustle on that is, I know we talked about Motown and their playing the game in the 60s, right? Trying to make these short, radio friendly, trying to get on a part of that desegregation piece to say, hey, if you're going to put us on the radio, we're not going to overstay our welcome. We're going to be there 2.5, 3 minutes. We're going to put our song out. We're going to get it together. And then you get to the 70s and it's more like, no, we're not going to play nice anymore. We got musicians over here and we want to play. And we want to make 5-minute songs. We want to make 7-minute songs that would have been 10-minute songs if somebody didn't finally say, okay, guys, we got it. Let's stop. So that lady is an example of that. The radio version is 3 minutes. The album version is 5.5 minutes, because that last 2.5, 3 minutes is basically just like a jam session where they just keep going. Yeah, and they just keep going, and Ernie's guitaring, Marvin is bassing, Chris Jasper is back there with the keyboard, and they're just going off. And I don't know where Ron Isley went to go get sandwiches or something. He came back, they were still playing. He was like, oh, all right. And like, it's just a jam session. So you think about Parliament Funkadelic and what they were doing. You think about what a lot of the jam bands started doing in the late 70s. There's a bridge directly from that lady to that. And it's just people wanted to be able to play, and they wanted to be able to show that they could play. And so you have this amazing vocalist in Ron Isley, and now you got killer guitar playing, you got instrumentation, you got, like you said, chord progressions, you got beat changes, mood changes, all this stuff where it just takes you on a journey for 5.5 minutes. And this is, again, it's the jumping off point for this great era of Isley Brother records. So they put out, like 12 records in the 3+3 phase. And it's just hit after hit. So many, a lot of things that the Isleys are known for, even to this day, are the ballads. So every album had at least a couple of ballads on it, and you're talking definitive. You're talking the type of stuff that people try to do whenever they revisit the 70s and say, hey, I'm going to make a killer ballad, and I'm going to really hit the point home on this. The Isley Brothers is going to be a template for a lot of those type of artists and the things they're trying to do. So it was a big deal for them. Also, too, that this was kind of the beginning of them lowering the amount of covers that they did, because now you got the 3 younger members and they got all these ideas and they want to use Ron's voice, and they just want to paint this canvas and let Ron do the rest. And so they didn't need as many, that whole criticism of them not having any records left, so they have to keep doing covers. That kind of went away. But even in 73, they did Summer Breeze.
Summer Breeze.
Yes. And that's a cover.
Yes.
So
I remember you introduced that to me in the early 2000s.
Yeah. And so they got that, and they also did James Taylor again and said, they did Walk Your Way, which is, wow. Great song, both versions. And then later on, they got even funnier in 74, and they did Hello It's Me, which I was very of age by the time I heard the original version, and that song was heavily covered. So I heard another cover and thought that was the original, but no, the original goes all the way back well before. So, for the most part, a lot of what they did was original music by that time, still with inspirations and things that you can see it in the era of that time where they may have gotten inspired by it. But it's really a great run of music for them. So this is where I wanted to start.
Right now, I'm holding in my hand Brother, 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 the Isleys. Came out in 1972.
Yep.
Side A starts off with Brother, Brother. Side A ends with Lay Away.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good one. That's right before 3+3.
Yes. Love Put Me on the Corner.
Love Put Me on the Corner. That is a really good album. So, and yeah, so in some cases they didn't know necessarily what they wanted to do, but yeah, that album is a fun one as well. But it's just great how they were able to go on this crazy run where they had everything together. And even by that time, the younger brothers were starting to mix in, even in 72, but they were officially added to the group, in 73 with Who's That Lady. So, and the album was called 3+3, matter of fact, too. So they weren't being sneaky. There was no subtext. They were like 3+3. It's 6 of us now instead of 3.
Hear me calling out to you, because that's all that I can do. Your eyes tell me to pursue, but you say, look, yeah, but don't touch.
No, don't touch, man. I would dance upon a string, and the gift she wants I bring. I would give her anything if she would just do what I say. He can't. That's a funny lyric. Come around my way, baby, shine my way. And then at the end, I would love to take her home, but her heart is made of stone. Got to keep on keeping on. If I don't, she'll do me wrong. That sounds cool just saying it. So
yeah,
him singing it was even just more insane. I remember once I got to high school and started having candid discussions with my parents about 70s music, right? Because it was coming back around. I had some records. I had some tapes from their collection, the ones that I didn't break according to them. And I would ask them about these songs, and I would ask my mom about, hey, like, okay, you were blah, blah, blah age when this came out. Like, did y'all like this? And then I see my mom's eyes light up like, did we like this? Like, you don't even understand. Like, this would come on. You talk about Soul Train as the outlet for these type of artists. Because again, we're still talking about the beginnings of desegregation. So just seeing these cats on TV was a big deal. Like now, I always make fun of people that are constantly unimpressed, right? Like they're talking about meh. Like they type the word meh all the time. Like when they type M, the meh, that's the autocorrect for them because they're constantly unimpressed. And I think about the 70s and from the frame of my parents, like they were impressed. They were excited to see these people because you weren't sure. This was part of the expansion that I was talking about that got even bigger in the 80s and 90s when you start having CDs and you have too many channels to watch. And now we have the internet where it's too much to look at. You can never make it to the end of the internet, no matter how hard you try, no matter how much stuff you look at on your phone. There's always some corner of the internet that you're not going to see. But in this moment, it was just like these people have a song on the radio. Somebody has enough money to buy the 8-track or the album or whatever. And then you turn on the TV on Saturday and these guys are standing there singing the song. And that's kind of that rock star moment, that excitement for these people. And they're looking at it like, again, they're throwing everything at it. They're kitchen sinking this. It's the whole family standing up there singing and they're bringing it. And like my mom talking about this song made me like it even more, just seeing her face light up, just listening to her talk about it. So it's like, man, when I hear it, I think about her explaining it to me, like how much these songs worked on the target audience.
Now, did they produce themselves or did they have a producer?
So during this period of time, they were mostly self-contained. So it was like at the most, they may have some session people. Like even you think about a guy like Stevie Wonder as this idea that he's sitting in the studio by himself playing all this stuff. But then when you look at the credits, there's Ray Parker Jr. and all these amazing musicians that are a part of it and helping out. it's kind of the same things with the Isley. It's mostly the Isleys as far as the vocals and the main instrumentation, but they do have session people that come in and like maybe play a drum or play an organ or, just get in on something, right? So I think but it's mostly Isleys just sitting there
and
playing
like moving mics.
Yeah.
Like where should this mic go with the drum or engineering it? So okay, but they're doing all of that.
Yeah. So I mean, even Bill Withers was somebody that they worked with a decent amount during the early 70s as well. So it's, they had people around them with talent helping them out too, but a lot of it was that 3+3 lineup. And the story goes is that most of it was the younger crew. The younger three was doing a lot of the legwork for the musicianship, and then the vocals would be the older brothers, with Ron being on the lead and O'Kelly and Rudolph being in the background. Like you're talking about, doo-wopping, stronging it up in the background, layering vocals, bringing the call and response, bringing the chants, bringing the catchy, and they just jammed it out with them as much as they could.
So what's interesting about that is when this song first comes out in its original form in the 60s, that's a different 15 to 24-year-old than when this comes out in the 70s, and there's a different set of 15 to 24-year-olds and how it's received.
Right, of course. And the crazy thing about the Isley Brothers, they were able to do that multiple times, like sing to that core audience of that age. They were able to I don't know what you want to call it, like address that audience repeatedly over the course of multiple eras. So they would just kind of change the get-ups a little bit and change the groove a little bit, and they understood music well enough to know how to move with that stuff. So you go from Shout in the 50s to This Old Heart of Mine and things like that in the 60s, and then It's Your Thing and all of that in between that. And then you hit this, this psychedelic, we could do everything thing in the 70s that went all the way up to the early 80s. But then in the 80s, they said, okay, you don't want to hear as much of this. We're just going to get smooth on y'all then. And we're going to focus on the ballads. And that's when you get the Between the Sheets and the Choosy Lovers and all those iconic songs. And then after Between the Sheets, those guys ended up splitting up. The 3+3 split into two separate groups again. So you had Jasper Isley, and they did Caravan of Love. I know Kevin and I, we always have those jokes going back and forth on the chat about the I'm Your Brother, Don't You Know, and all of that. Like, that was that group. The younger group made their own thing with Chris Jasper as the lead singer. And then the original three went off and made their own stuff. Unfortunately, O'Kelly died right in that period of time, like in the mid 80s. So then the Isley Brothers just kind of stopped. The Ron Isley version of the Isley Brothers kind of just stopped for a while. But, again, reinvention, figuring out something, getting somebody to help them do the stuff they wanted to do. I don't know if you know the group Angela and Renee and Angela. Like I Love You More and More Than You Know, Renee and Angela. And once they broke up, what do you know? Ron Isley starts a relationship with Angela Winbush. Well, what do you know? Angela Winbush is a hell of a writer and a producer. And so the Isleys show back up again a few years later with Angela Winbush in the background doing a lot of the writing and producing. And then again, it's late 80s and they just keep it super duper smooth. And they just go almost all ballads all the time because they're like, hey, we know people like our ballads. So people still like my Ron Isley smooth falsetto voice. So I'm going to hit them with that. And then that worked for a few years. And then they had another kind of down period in the early 90s. And then enter Robert Kelly, who comes up with this idea like of working with Ron Isley, but turning Ron Isley into some boss man character of Mr. Biggs, which of course is ridiculous and
Hold up.
hilarious.
Can't you see two men are talking?
And they rode that for an unbelievable amount of time. And I mean, you watch those videos and it's like, this is so funny. Because you think this is like a 50-something-year-old man sitting at the house. He's had Shout is 1959. You know?
Yeah.
And somebody walks up to him in 1994 and says, hey, man, I've been making records for 2 or 3 years. I love your music. I'm like a child of your music. Man, if you guys are still interested, I got a weird idea, but just hear me out. And then he goes on to explain it to him, and Ron is like, yeah, I'll buy some suits and a cane, and I'll just show up and yell at you on a song for 10 years and get away with it.
Okay, so you talked about this where it's like, hey, over, like each decade, they're appealing to a genre of, youth. And so I remember when it was that long form video concept or whatever, and I was in Washington, D.C. I was at this National Young Leaders Conference. It was where like kids from all over the United States, we ran like some mock government. And when it was some downtime in the rec room, that video was in heavy rotation. And I remember that made people like stop and watch.
Yeah.
Can't you see two men are talking?
Yeah, they were doing like the soap opera drama on record. And I mean, it just gave him a chance to be that dude that's just like, hey, here I am. I'm still Ron Isley. You need to respect me. And like, yeah, his voice is, you're gonna know it's him. So it's just, man.
Going back to, I can't remember not knowing when the music didn't exist. Like, I can't remember not knowing like, oh, I don't know who the Isley Brothers are.
Right. So they really had a crazy run. Again, the core run is this 3+3 run. And even that, I mean, you're talking between the sheets was 83, 84. Who's That Lady is 73. So that was all three. Everything in between there was 3+3. And they hit it all. They did arena music. They did rock music. They did call and responses. They did social commentary. They did the bedroom stuff. They did the ballads. They had a song about a guy in the military getting lost. Like, they just did like whatever they could think of. They just got it all out there. And that was during the era where a lot of artists did an album every year, and they did. And like so many artists that you'll hear me talk about, they eventually made it around to their double album, which is a really good record. There's not as many huge, obvious hits on it, but if you listen to that album, it's like 15 songs or so, and it's a go. It's a go. They did a little disco too, because everybody's got to do a little disco at some point, because they were singing during that time. So they figured out how to make that and kind of still stay as themselves. But even with that, I mean, they had to Killer Ballads on that record too. So this was, I said 14 or 15. It's 14 songs on there. But yeah, it's like about half of it is up tempo, which was a lot for them at that time. But yeah, there's good songs all over that thing. And that's like a lesser known Isley album. But man, yeah, you would have to stop me from doing almost 10 episodes in a row on random Isley Brothers songs. 'Cause I could pick it, and that would be before I got to him cussing out R. Kelly on the song and all that. Like, it would be, we could cover them for forever, you know.
And we're talking within the past 10 years. I can't even remember what commercial it was, but they were playing That Lady, and I remember they animatronic or whatever, they did some special effect where like this lapdog sang, "Who's that lady?"
Yeah.
You remember this commercial? It was within the past 10 years.
I don't remember when the commercial was, but I do. I remember every time something like that happens, I'll look at my wife and say nothing is sacred. And I'll be like, I'll be sarcastic, like, man, how did this make it into a commercial? But then you have to remember, I mean, these songs are 50 and 40 years old. So it's about time for them to come back around in something, right?
And I'm thinking, I think with That Lady, I don't know if I straight up heard that from, oh, my parents are playing a record. I'm thinking that was in a soundtrack, like that was like in a movie. Now, it could have been played for laughs or whatever, but like it was one of them things where that was just in the zeitgeist pop culture. Now, did you say that this made the top 40?
Oh yeah, for
the song
for
or no?
sure.
Okay,
Yeah, so it was like probably top 10. Let me go look. Yeah, it made it up to number 6.
Because I would think
on the Billboard.
Okay, so and we're saying this was 1973.
Yeah.
I would just think when this song came out, this version, that people just perceive this, oh, this is a new kind of cool.
Right.
And, you know, we're dealing with Shaft. We're dealing with like kind of, you know, the smooth fly operator pimp kind of thing in those 70s, right? And this music just fits it. It's a soundtrack to The Stroll, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking Shaft, you're talking Superfly, Curtis Mayfield, and yeah, they fit right in. The get-ups were like that. It was like a mix between, you know, the cool guys on the TV shows and Elvis almost, because there's jumpsuits, there's Desperado ponchos. Like these guys it's 6 of them, so they all had an opportunity to do their own thing. And Ernie Isley was a big fan of Jimi Hendrix, and you know that story of Jimi Hendrix being a member of the Isleys in the 60s as well. So it's like they had connectivity to him as well. So it's almost like those guitar solos, almost like like paying homage to their old bandmate. So it's just cool.
And we get a gnarly guitar solo on this record.
Yes, we do. And we get 2 because we open with one
space.
and then, yeah, they just kind of, again, they all go get sandwiches and he's just in there like doing it. And it's like, well, okay, Ernie, you still going? He's like, oh yeah, I'm still going. You guys let me go. I'm gonna ride all over this thing and make sure that Ron doesn't have anything to come back to. Just give me the whole part 2, and I'm just gonna do my thing with it.
And you know, you mentioned how this may not be the last time we cover the Isleys. Maybe when we return on one of these episodes of On the Record Jams, we'll do Brother Brother. Maybe we might do the record Pop That Thing.
If we can get away with that. Or Layaway, which is, you know, put your loving on the layaway. We can get if we want to get in trouble, we can get in trouble. We can get in all sorts of trouble. We can get our show canceled right on up in there.
Oh my God.
You ain't gonna find no baby oil in my house though. I guarantee you that.
No. But hey, that thing. Wow.
Bang, bang,
I mean,
bang.
that lady.
Yeah.
No, that lady. Yes. Okay. Yeah, you know, like, maybe I'm making this up. I feel like there was, like, when we were in the 80s, there was, like, this backlash to the 70s. And it took a while. I think it took to a Y2K for, like, 70s to be, like, okay again. But I remember, like, if it was even perceived like you were wearing bell bottoms, you got clowned. And, like, if 70s music came out, it seemed like it was dusty and it seemed like a dated thing. Where I feel like now, like, what is it, 2024? I think if you played Shake It Off by Taylor Swift, it won't make the party stop. It just keep on going.
Yeah, it'll just keep
I guess a lot of stuff, I think, like, from 2015, like, if you played it, nobody would freak out. But I think when we were in the 80s, if someone just threw, like, some 70s stuff on, like, at a kid thing, people would have freaked out.
Oh, yeah, because, I mean, the 80s was a different thing. You talk about the death of a lot of the bands, a lot of mechanical drums. 90s was kind of where I thought a lot of the mechanical drums got kind of whack. But the 80s drums was a different thing. And that switch. But I always view the 70s backlash as a disco thing. Because people decided disco was bad. But if you go into that pre-disco, like this is, like the funk stuff, I felt like funk came back pretty quick with the late 80s with hip-hop. because there was so much
Yeah,
funk
there you
sampling
go.
going on.
You're right. Well, Arthur, hey man, we did That Lady by the Isleys. Or is it Who's That Lady? Is it That Lady or Who's That Lady?
I always get it confused. It's That Lady parts 1 and 2.
That Lady, part 1 and part 2.
The older version was Who's That Lady?
Yeah, okay, that's the distinction.
Yep.
All right. So, and then we did Nirvana's Francis Farmer Will Have a Revenge on Seattle on their third proper album, In Utero. Guys, hey, let us know, what did you think about this discussion? We talked some 70s Isley Brothers, 3+3. We talked some 90s Nirvana. Tell us your thoughts. Where can they reach us, Arthur?
Well, they have a few options. So they can go to On The Records on Facebook. We can go to On The Records Jam on the X/Twitter. And, between those two places, you should be able to catch up with us. Or you can catch us at ontherecordjams@gmail.com as well if you want to send an email. We're of the era where I come from the blog era, so if you want to write me a long message, I will read it, and we can follow up in that way as well. So there's options to catch up with us.
Yeah, because especially if you know some tidbits or you have questions about these songs or this era, and you write to us in long form on ontherecordsjams@gmail.com, you can be part of the discussion. We can read it on the podcast and expand this because, hey, we want to be good custodians of just music talking. Like Arthur was saying, we came up during the blog era. So, man, we work these full-time jobs and, we want to escape. We want to, chill and wind down. And one of the ways we can do this is by talking about some music, man.
Talking about some great, good music, the people who created the subtext around that music. We can really, do people still call it nerding out? We can really nerd out on some music, yeah.
Yeah, let's nerd out. Yeah. So, hey, let us know. Thank you for listening. This was wonderful. Arthur and AJ here with you on the Record Jams, brought to you by the Right On Network.